When I was a kid growing up with my family, we lived in the Midwest, and my grandparents, my dad's parents, lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And we would visit them about every 2-3 years and kind of went through this routine when we got there. First thing we did was we saw the house. Here's a picture of their house, 1330 Squirrel Hill Avenue in Pittsburgh. And then we saw the front door. There's the front door, and I'd get excited. And then we walk in, and my grandfather and grandmother would greet us, but I saw the closet door as they opened the door. Why is the closet door so important? Because that's where the gifts were. And after we hugged and after we said good to see you all again, I would often say, or always say, "What did you get me this year, grandfather?" And grandfather would always look, he'd go back to the closet and say, "Well, let's see." He'd pull something out. And I remember this would go on for several years and several years and several years. But I remember going to grandfather's house, and I would actually get more excited about the gift than my grandfather. I'd get more excited about my gift than my grandfather. And early on in our faith journey, it seems like it's a lot like that for many of us. When we're young in our faith, we so often come to God and we ask for a gift. A gift could come, we ask for an answer to prayer, we ask for a feeling of comfort, we ask for a healing of some sort, we ask for a special guy or a special girl to get lost or come back into your life or come into your life to begin with. And so we ask for these gifts, and it seems like when we're young in our faith that God seems to answer these prayer requests all the time. He gives us and blesses us with these gifts, and it's awesome. But over time, the focus can often become on the gift and not the giver of gifts. Right? So often we ask for gifts and it becomes all about the gift and not the gift giver. We can easily get so excited about the answer to the prayer, the healing, the job offer, rather than the gift giver. And the problem with this is this, and you all know this at some level, and this may be what is going on in your marriage. It may be what's going on with your relationship with your brother or your sister. It may be what's going on with your kids or someone at work. And it's impossible to have an authentic relationship with someone with whom you're only trying to get something. It's impossible. Do you have anybody like this in your life? Or are you like this to somebody else? That what the relationship is about is them getting something from you or you getting something from them. And it's really impossible, I think, to have an authentic, meaningful relationship with someone when they're always have agenda. They always have an agenda. It's just really hard. So we're in a sermon series called Signs, and I'm asking you, if you're part of this church, to do 3 things. I'm asking you to listen to sermons. If you're not here on Sunday, I'll send them to you during the week. Please do listen to them. Do the Bible studies. There's 2 Bible studies in your bulletin. I'm asking you to do that. And then also read through the Gospel of John. There's a bookmark that you've all gotten twice. If you need another one, they're out in the hallway. And this week is week 4. We're reading chapters 10, 11, and 12. So I encourage you to read through the Gospel of John. So the sermon series is Signs, and signs point to something other than itself, right? Signs are there to point you to something else. The signs aren't about the sign. And Jesus performed many miracles in his life. But the gospel writer John, he chose a handful of miracles and he called them signs because the miracles weren't about the miracle. The miracles in the Gospel of John were to point us to the miracle maker. The gift of a miracle, the sign, was about pointing people to Jesus. And so the question in the Gospel of John is not of the miracle, hey, how did he do that? Or do you really believe in miracles? Or the question is not, hey, could you do that for me? Although all those are legitimate questions. The question in the Gospel of John is, who is this guy? Who is this guy? And as I've been saying, the gospel writer, the disciple John, didn't follow Jesus because of his faith. He followed Jesus because of what he saw and what he heard. And then as an older man, I think someone said, hey, John, you're about to leave. You have a story. You have a vantage point to tell. And he writes the Gospel of John with the purpose that people reading it would go through the same process and come to faith in Jesus. So our scripture today is from John 6, and we're thinking about the fourth sign. And as you know, if you followed through the Gospel of John, Jesus goes from northern Israel, Galilee, where he was born, the Sea of Galilee, and the southern part of Israel is Jerusalem. He goes back and forth, and now he's just walked 4 to 6 day journey from Jerusalem in the south back up to the hinterlands, the remote area of northern Israel and the Sea of Galilee. One of the reasons I think he leaves the city and goes into the remote area is his cousin, John the Baptist, had recently been killed, beheaded. And I think Jesus needed a break. Jesus was human. He was like you and me, and he needed to get away from the hustle and bustle. He needed to grieve. He needed time away. So he goes to a remote part of the country. But in spite of that, word spreads that Jesus is in the area, and Jesus always has people following him. And so we pick up the story there. So John writes these words. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs that he had performed by healing the sick. A great crowd of people followed him. Why? Because they wanted something. A great crowd of people followed him because of faith? No, they didn't follow him because no one had faith in the first century in Jesus. There was no reason to have faith. That's what the signs were primarily about, is what John would say. They followed him because of signs, because they were performing miracles and things that they needed. Or maybe some just wanted to see the magic show. Water to wine and raising the dead and healing people. And next, John throws in a little detail that foreshadows what the people were thinking. John throws in 2 little details that are easy to miss, that foreshadows what the people are thinking and what they were hoping for in Jesus. John writes, the Jewish Passover festival was near. Now, Passover was the regular celebration of Moses delivering God's people from enslavement in Egypt. And so John throws this little line in there, the Jewish Passover festival was near. Because in people's mind, every year at Passover, they were hoping and thinking about Messiah. Messiah would be someone who would come, just like Moses, and take them out of captivity. And the Jewish people were in captivity to Rome. And so every year at Passover, when they were remembering what God had done years and years and years ago, and they were hoping and praying because some of their prophets had said, another Moses is coming. Deliverance is coming. Hang in there. Well, this was hundreds of years gone by and no second Moses. But every Passover, there would be a heightened sense of, is he here? Is he here? Have you heard? Have you seen? And I think John throws this in, and you'll see later why he does that. John continues in his text. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming towards him, so Jesus is in a remote area of the country. He finally wants to take a break. He looks up, and church people are coming. They're calling him. They're ringing his bell. Can you meet us here? Right? And I'm sure he goes, okay. And he knew what they wanted. They were enamored with the sights. They were enamored with the prize. But they didn't really ask the question, who is this? Jesus says to Philip, where shall we buy bread for these people to eat? Philip is a follower of Jesus. Jesus is with his 12 disciples. He sees thousands of people coming, and Jesus says, hey, guys, where should we buy some bread? And Philip answered him, it would take more than a half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to even have a bite. Right? There are thousands of people coming. Translated, Jesus, there's no way out here in the remote area that we're going to find a store open or a restaurant to get all these people food. So another disciple, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, jumps in and he says, hey, Jesus, here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will that go among so many? And Jesus said, have the people sit down. There's plenty of grass in this place. And they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. So here again, John throws in a little detail that foreshadows what the people are hoping for and expecting. 5,000 men were there. How come no women? Well, women are there. Is it because women didn't matter and women didn't count? That's true in that culture, but I don't think that's why John puts in 5,000 men were there. He put in the Passover because people had a heightened sense that the Messiah, that the deliverer, the coming conqueror is coming. But he throws in 5,000, I think, because 5,000 men was the equivalent of a fully formed Roman legion. 5,000 was a Roman legion of men that would be ready to do the leader, the king's bidding. So hold on to that thought for a second. So if there are 5,000 men, scholars think there's maybe 20,000 people, counting women and kids. So try and picture the scene. Jesus is with his 12 disciples. They're kind of up on a hill. They look down, and all these people are coming. 15, 20, 25,000 people. So remember, Andrew says, hey, here's 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. So Jesus then took the loaves, he gave thanks, and he distributed those to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. Now, first of all, if you're a disciple and you watch Jesus take 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and he offers it up, and there are 20,000 people, aren't you a little embarrassed? Say, oh my gosh, here goes Jesus again, going to embarrass us. Lord, thank you for this 5 loaves and 2 fish. And I wonder when it hit the people what was going on. The text continues. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted. So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. Now, it's important to understand that bread is really important in the Jewish history. When Moses was taking the people, God's people, the Israelite people, the Jewish people out of captivity, they ran out of food, right? They ran out of food. And God has a talk with, Moses has a talk with God. God says, okay, I'll bring you food every day. So every morning, there are little wafers. And it's not in the text, but I'm sure they said, okay, Moses, is there anything else on the menu? What are these little wafers going to do? Well, they cooked the wafers and they became bread. And there was just enough for the day. There was only enough day, and so the next morning they wake up, they have no bread, and the manna would be on the ground. So bread is really important. Bread is really, really important to their faith because it's a reminder that God provided just enough. Just enough. The story continues. After the people saw the sign, and I wonder when it hit the people. Like, where is all this food coming from? We're not in Jerusalem where there's a big city where there's lots of places to get food. I'm not sure for 25,000 people, but so they were in a remote area, and the people went, "Where's all this food coming from?" I'm wondering when it hit them. It's not in the text, but I just wonder. After the people saw the sign Jesus had performed, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who has come into the world." Finally, the crowd's starting to get it. It'll be short-lived. They're finally not looking at the gift, the bread, but they're looking at the gift giver. They're saying, who is this guy? And this is the question that John wants you to ask. This is the question John wants me to ask. Who is Jesus? Who is this guy? Because John saw these miracles. And he says, this is what brought me to faith. These miracles, these signs pointed to the identity of Jesus. And finally, they're getting it. This is the one, maybe they're thinking, this is the one that Moses talked about. This is the one Daniel talked about with the Son of Man, which was Jesus' self-imposed favorite nickname. that a prophet 1,000 years earlier, Daniel, said he would be the coming one that would rescue the people. And so there was this heightened sense, because the signs were pointing to the gifts of bread was pointing to the gift giver, and the people were starting to ask the most important question: who is this guy? But it doesn't last. For just a moment they got it, but Jesus knew that their recognition and their acknowledgement was temporary. John continues, Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. See, the people saw the signs and they're thinking, this is the guy. And Jesus knew that in their heart they wanted to take him and make him king. That's why the two little hints that John has, Passover and 5,000, were saying that the people wanted to take Jesus and make him king so that they could overthrow the Roman occupation. 5,000 men starting in northern Israel. By the time, led by King Jesus, they got to Jerusalem, they must have thought, maybe there'd be 25,000 men. And if one guy, Moses, could overthrow all of Egypt with God's help, what could Jesus do with 25,000 men? The whole country would be electrified. He's finally here. King Jesus is here. And of course, Jesus would take them to the gates of Jerusalem. But he wouldn't come to Jerusalem to be coronated as a king. He came to Jerusalem to be crucified as a suffering Savior. And so Jesus knew what was in their heart. And the people's intent for Jesus was not Jesus' intent for himself. What the people wanted Jesus to do was not in Jesus' heart. And that's not what he was going to do. And so once again, Jesus withdrew. He dismissed the crowd. But before he leaves the crowd, before he dismisses the crowd, he gets the 12 in the boat, the 12 disciples in the boat, and he says, go to the other side of the lake Sea of Galilee, which is kind of like Lake Tahoe, if you're thinking, what's Sea of Galilee like? It's kind of not with those beautiful snow-capped mountains, but it's kind of like that. So he goes to a lonely place and he prays again. Jesus eventually joins the disciples on the other side of the lake, and once again, as always, a crowd gathers. Hey, he's in the area. But Jesus is about to thin the crowd out. A great crowd comes to Jesus, but Jesus isn't necessarily into crowds that aren't open to asking the question, who are you anyway? So he's about to call them out. He's about to call maybe some of us out. So here's a question. Have you ever thought yourself, or perhaps have you ever heard this, or maybe heard a friend say, or your mom or dad say, or your spouse say, or your kids say something like this? You know what? I gave up on faith. I gave up on church because I wasn't getting anything out of it. You know what? I gave up on my faith because all I saw were Christians. And if that's what a Christian is, I don't want to be anything like that. You know, I gave up on faith. I gave up on Jesus. I gave up on the religious thing because they espoused an aspect of the faith that I don't believe in. I used to serve, but I don't get anything out of it anymore. I used to give, but I don't get anything out of it anymore. I used to love the sermons and the music, but I don't get anything out of it anymore. Do you know anybody like that? Have you ever been like that? Are you like that now? And the point that Jesus is about to make, and this is strong, as long as it's about getting something out of it, we don't understand it. As long as it's, Jesus, what can you do for me today? I want the prize. I want the gift. I want the gift. I want the gift. Now, asking for gifts is good. And Jesus asks us to ask for gifts. But as long as it's about the gift and the gift giver, we're still children looking at the closet door asking Grandfather God, what did you get me? What did you get me? And so Jesus is on the other side of the Sea of Galilee with his disciples. The crowds find him and they show up, and John says, When they found Jesus on the other side of the lake, they asked him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" Now remember, when you're trying to navigate a relationship with somebody that you want something from, you're not direct. We all have people in our lives, and maybe you're this way, that when you're in the relationship primarily just to get something from them, you're not usually direct. They're not usually direct with you. They're usually like, "Hey, Jamie. Hey, Dad. Hey, Mom. Hey, Susie. How you been?" And so the crowd shows up and says, "Hey, Jesus, how'd you get here? When'd you get here?" And Jesus says this, "I tell you the truth, or very truly I tell you, you're looking for me not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves and you had your fill." See, Jesus gets right to the point. He says, "You're not interested when I got here. You're not interested in me. What you're interested in is what I can give you. You're hungry again, aren't you? You want another miracle." Bzz. Jesus cuts through their intent. And then he leads into the crowd, and he leans into us, and he says, "Do not work for food that spoils." See, he knows that inside each and every human being, because God placed it there, is a yearning for meaningfulness, is a yearning to experience life, is a yearning to experience peace and joy and fun and meaning, having meaning and purpose. And Jesus says, no, don't work for food that spoils. He says, don't give your entire life to, don't waste the hours of your day, the years of your life, working for stuff that doesn't last, that doesn't satisfy. And Jesus uses the word food because that's what they're thinking of, but obviously he's not talking about bread or fish or croissants or stuffed red peppers with a little bit of cheese. And anyway, he's using the word food in an all-encompassing way. Food is whatever fills you. Food is whatever you think will fill you, will satisfy you. Jesus is saying that the food of this world, success and popularity and power and money, not bad stuff, but it eventually, to use that metaphor, spoils. Or you're going to get hungry again, and so you go out and try and fill your life with this stuff, and it's not bad necessarily. It just doesn't fully satisfy. And Jesus wants better for them and better for us. In fact, in the Gospel of John, John goes to great length to communicate that Jesus wants the best for you and the best for his followers, the best for everyone, and he uses this word life. The purpose of John's Gospel, he said this, there are tons of miracles that I could have chosen, and then in chapter 20 he says this, but these are written, the miracles he put in his Gospel, that you may believe, that you may trust, that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life. Zoe. And then in John 10:10, Jesus said, I've come that you may have life and have it abundantly. This is the yearning of Jesus' heart. But when he sees a group of people or an individual just running after the prizes of food that can temporarily fill you, he says, no. He's a truth teller. And he gets in people's faces. I mean, if you've read or reading John, Jesus is quite strong and shocking. He says, do not work for food that spoils, but in contrast, work for food that endures to eternal life. In contrast to the things of this world that spoil, work, pursue food, yearn for the things that last for all eternity. And then Jesus says, which the Son of Man will give you. It's a gift. It's not bad to pursue gifts if it leads us to the gift giver. Give you, it's a gift. Well, what is the gift that leads to life? And someone in the crowd who has that question says, playing off the word work, he says, what must we do to do the works God requires? See, Jesus is offering life. Jesus is teaching them and us that there's something more to life than just pursuing this stuff, because you get hungry again, do you not? See, success and relationships and good stuff is good stuff. But we get hungry again. We get hungry again. And so someone asks, what must we do to do the works of God. Notice that they have it wrong. What must we do? See, they're Jewish people, and their faith was all about rules and regulations, do's and don'ts. What are the things that we must do, Jesus? Can you give us a new list? I mean, we have 640 in our Bible, and we're trying to do those things, but what else must we do? See, they're looking for another list. And notice also that they were expecting a long list of doing. What are the works? What are all the things you're going to give us to do, Jesus? Because we want, I think, what you're offering. We sure like the gifts you give us. So tell us, what must we do? What things must we do? Jesus answered, the work. One thing. The work. Simple. Very challenging. One thing. Of the work of God is this, to believe in the one He sent. One thing. It's not a whole bunch of works. It's to believe. And I'm thinking, if they're hearing this, goes, is that it? Sign me up for the one thing. Okay, I believe. To believe. Now watch how the people respond. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. So they asked him, watch this. This is hilarious to me. What sign then will you give us that we may see it and believe you? Okay, what sign are you going to give us so that we can believe it? I mean, what will you do? And then they go back to Moses. Our ancestors ate manna, bread, in the wilderness. As it's written, He gave bread from heaven to eat. And I'm thinking Jesus is going to do this. Oh my gosh, they're thinking about lunch again. I mean, seriously? And then they ask for what? A sign? What sign are you going to give us? And again, I'm thinking Jesus is thinking, let's see, what sign? What have you just seen recently? 20,000 people got fed by 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and there was an abundance left over. Because I want you to experience life and have life abundantly. Was that sign not good enough for you? Hey, how about if I die and rise from the dead? Will that be good enough for you? No. It won't. Because for some people, it's never enough. In fact, by the grace of God, it wasn't enough for me. It's never good enough. They always want one more. Do you ever want just one more? Okay, one more prayer answered, then I'll really believe. Okay, just one more miracle, one more good doctor visit, one more good healing, one more good raise. And then time goes by and maybe you get those gifts and you go, one more, I mean it this time. Just one more and I'll super duper believe. You can quote me on that. You see, when you're more interested in the gifts than the gift giver, you're never satisfied. And it's impossible to have a relationship with someone, a healthy relationship with someone, when they're always trying to get something from you. Because they're more interested in the gifts than the gift giver. And so people walk away, and that's exactly what happened. John tells us at the end of chapter 6, many of His disciples, not the 12, turned back and no longer followed Him. Jesus got unfollowed by hundreds of people. So what about you? What about me? Are you in it just for the food? Are you in it just for the gifts, the blessings? Or does God's blessing in your life and my life that happen all the time, does it point us to the gift giver? Do we answer the question, who are you? And is Jesus good enough? Well, what are we to do? And I want to end with this. Jesus gives us 2 responses, 2 commands in this text. And they're really simple, but so challenging. The first one is believe. He says, believe in the one God has sent. Jesus is saying, trust me. John, who's saying, you got to have faith. See, he didn't have faith to come to Jesus. He saw and heard. What John's saying to you and to me, it's harder. He says, you're going to need to trust me, that I'm a reliable witness, and trust the Spirit living in you. It's harder. Believe means to trust. It means to invite Jesus into your life. Say, I will follow you. You might say, well, I've decided I have placed my trust in Jesus and I'm still hungry. The short version is, in this life, we're always going to have hunger pains and hunger pangs. This side of the kingdom of heaven, we're still always going to be wanting and desiring. But what the promise of Jesus and the whole New Testament is that our belly can be filled more and more. Believe. Well, how? The second command is this is work. Believe and work for food that lasts. What's food that lasts? It's stuff that lasts for eternity. It's relationships. It's not stuff, and stuff isn't bad. We need stuff. We like stuff. Stuff can be God's blessing. But we want it to lead us to the giver of stuff. First, believe. And second, work. That's why Jesus said, you're the light of the world. You're the salt of the earth. He says, as you work, you'll believe more. You can believe cognitively, but as you take steps of faith, you'll believe more and more. Believing isn't just a one and done thing, right? The disciples believed, they unbelieved. They believed, they kind of believed. They wanted one more, they got one more. They believed, they needed another one. We're all like that. We're all like that.